Starting in 5 seconds. May I refer briefly to the question of the state's reorganization, which has been discussed here during the last 4 days. I have been greatly distressed about much that has happened. It has caused me much unhappiness and produced in me a sense of failure which I do not often have. However, what has worried me and distressed me most is not so much the actual occurrences as the growth of a spirit of violence all over the country, or is at any rate in parts of it the attempt to settle problems by violent methods is, I think, very bad for this country, regardless of the merits of any cause. Once you enter the reason of trying to settle problems by violent methods, you go towards something that is perilously near to civil war. Our country, with all its faults, has shown to the world a certain stability, certain peace, a certain measure of progress, and thereby established a certain reputation. This reputation is based on some fundamental characteristics. If we enter the reason of violent explosions simply because dislike this thing or that, then we lose not only our reputation but something much more important than that. Are we going to become the type of country where every other month one hears of some kind of a violent revolution? That is not democracy, but something which is the very reverse of democracy. Apart from that, it is a complete denial of any idea of measured or ordered progress. I can understand an attitude, and I believe that some people hold that attitude that nothing can be achieved by these slow democratic or parliamentary methods, that nothing can be achieved by peaceful methods, that in fact nothing can be achieved if one goes about it step by step, that one must break everything and produce some kind of a clean slate to start afresh on. I do not agree with such an attitude. I think it is a matter for the Lok Sabha to consider very carefully where all this is leading us to, quite apart from the state's reorganization report. In great cities and elsewhere, there are always antisocial elements, gundas, and the like. One can deal with them if society generally disapproves of them, as it does. But when society approve of violent methods, then the gundas can immediately have the chance of their lifetime. The major question in India today, internally speaking, is this: what is going to be our policy in regard to this growing violence? I am not afraid of the violence of the hooligans, but of the spirit of violence. 2 days ago, on the occasion of the funeral procession in Lucknow of Narendra Deva, a person beloved of all, a policeman, was blinded and others were badly injured. Why should this happen? A funeral procession should be an occasion for solemnity. Instead, some people threw stones and pushed about, and a poor policeman lost an eye completely, apart from some police officers being rather badly injured by stones. I cannot understand this. We in India appear to have a split personality. We speak undoubtedly about non-violence, about our culture and Sanskriti, while in our daily behavior we are coming down to a level which is not a civilized level at all. A hurdle may be quite legitimate as an expression of opinion in a certain set of circumstances, but may become dangerous and objectionable in another set of circumstances. And I say that at the present moment, with these big tensions and bitterness prevailing in various parts of India, it is not patriotic, it is not wise, it is not reasonable to do anything which may lead to violence, even if the government is at fault. May I say a few words about the state's reorganization business? Slightly less than 2 months ago, we discussed the matter in this Lok Sabha. There was a very full debate, and I ventured to give expression to my own approach to this question then too. As I have watched development in various parts of the country, I have been troubled not by this occurrence or that, but by the atmosphere that is being gradually created. The main problem before me has been how to meet the challenge of the growing violence and bitterness. How can we possibly check it? How can we possibly soothe it? Some honorable members have referred rather caustically to some kind of a dictatorial approach by four men of the Congress committee who are supposed to lay down this and that. What exactly is the procedure we followed? I referred to it on the last occasion and to the multiplicity of these problems. I also pointed out that the problem usually was not one between the central government and a certain group or a certain state, but between two groups and states. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Some honorable members are perhaps not well acquainted with the development of the Congress outlook on the subject of linguistic provinces. Undoubtedly, in the 20s, we were strongly in favor of all work being done in the language of the area in order to enable the local people to play their part. Insofar as the importance of the language in doing work is concerned, we hold to the same principle, but let us not mix up two things, namely the importance of the development of our language and linguistic boundaries. The two are not the same thing. If you see the Congress resolutions of the last 3 or 4 years, you will find that all of them have stated quite clearly that language is an important factor, but that there are other economic, geographically, and developmental factors which are equally important. Finally, the most important factor, the overriding factor, is the unity of India. That is what the Congress has been saying all along. Now, seeing all that has happened since the publication of the SRC report, naturally, and even more than previously, our thoughts have gone towards laying a greater stress on the unifying factors. We have discussing the 5-year plan and thinking more and more in economic developmental terms. Take Bengal and Bihar. The area between Bengal and Bihar is the richest industrial area of India, and no doubt in a few years' time it will grow into the most heavily industrialized area. For developmental reasons, it was of very great advantage to Bihar and Bengal to work that area jointly. We have had enough experience in the last 5 years of small matters being delayed because two governments had to deal with them and pulled in to different directions. I am merely pointing out that in this case there were valid reasons. Everywhere you will find that the economic approach has now to be considered much more than previously, always making sure that the language approach is also there, not as a boundary but for the purpose of doing work in that language and seeing that the cultural aspect of language is always encouraged. Occasionally, it may be that two languages overlap. Suppose Bengal and Bihar form a union. Nothing will happen to the Bengali language or to the work done in Bengali. Nothing will happen to the Hindi there. I wish to say something about Bombay. It is quite wrong for us to go about censoring any community or group for what has happened. That is a wrong approach. There is no doubt what has happened in Bombay is disgraceful. In a similar situation in any other country, the army and the tanks would have come in, but in Bombay, only police force was used. Bombay has been a tragedy for all of us, but recrimination does not help. I think I should mention just one thing which should be borne in mind by all of us, namely the trend towards violence. The most important thing now is to calm and soothe the people to get rid of this bitterness as much as possible. I do not know how some people have been saying that in my broadcast about states reorganization, I had used the words irrevocable decisions. I have looked through my broadcast and it is not there. In a democratic structure of government, there is nothing irrevocable. We can sit down and consider any matter at any time. The point is that we must have the atmosphere to do it. We cannot do it if people beat one another and quarrel. We must calm down. It is obvious that no decision about Bombay is a happy decision which is looked upon by a large section of the people as an imposition on them. If the Gujaratis or the Maharashtrians feel imposed upon, it is not a happy decision. They, as well as others, have to live together in Bombay. Unfortunately, a situation has been created which makes a cool approach to the problem difficult. Let us cool down and become normal and then realize the fact that there is no question of one group dominating over another. Some people say that a few capitalists in Bombay wanted this to be done and that not to be done. I really do not understand this. For many parts, I can say that in the whole course of my conservations, I did not meet a single capitalist from Bombay, though they presented a memorandum which I saw. You can take it from me, you know it well enough that the capitalist in Bombay or elsewhere will probably be able to function under any conditions. There has been another proposal for judicial inquiry in regard to Bombay. My reaction is that whenever there is trouble, generally there should be an inquiry. But I must say that my mind is rather confused when I think of an inquiry into the Bombay occurrences. It will be a tremendous inquiry which will last for ages all along. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Irrigation and power form the basis of the agricultural and industrial development of our country. After the droughts of the previous 2 years, no one in India needs any reminder about the vital importance of irrigation. There is also no doubt that electricity will always be a basic element in any formula for progress. The drought has also proved that electricity is an input for agriculture. I am glad to be here because, as engineers, scientists, and technologists, you represent the future. As citizens and administrators, we look to you to uncover our natural resources and suggest how best these might be exploited in the national interest. Technology is moving ahead in every direction, and day by day, new opportunities are opening up before all of us. What we need is the availability of large quantities of power at very low prices, which would influence changes in technology and stimulate the development of a new technology. We have vast water resources in the Indo Gangetic basin, of which I am being constantly reminded by our Minister Dr. K.L. Rao. These must naturally be tapped for irrigation. When one merely thinks of all that our institutions or abroad, such as yours, can do, the prospects are truly exciting and open up new vistas in many areas of national life. You have already mentioned, Mr. President, the importance of electrification, and I am glad to find that some aspects of rural electrification figure on your agenda. In most of our 5 lakh villages, people are still prisoners of daylight and therefore have a short working day. At one time, we hoped that we would be able to electrify at least 1 lakh villages by 1970, which is the Gandhi centenary year. I still hope that we will somehow manage to reach this target and will continue to make rapid progress towards bringing electricity to the remaining villages. Today, we are able to build a good deal of the generating and transmission equipment which is required, but we have also to improve the economics of our power generation and transmission so as to supply cheap power to needy consumers and yet earn profits on the operations of our electricity undertakings. The development of regional grids will assist in optimizing the distribution system. This will be a great help to enrich all of us and yield better and quicker results. Only a fraction of the cultivated area is at present irrigated. You, Mr. President, have remarked that we can double the acreage under irrigation so that cropping can be extended. The amount of land available is fixed, but the pressure on the available land is steadily increasing. There is no alternative, therefore, to increasing the efficiency of land utilization and getting higher productivity per acre. Irrigation is one means towards this end. It is important that we utilize fully and rapidly such irrigation potential as has been already created. I think this requires much closer association than is generally found between the irrigation engineer, the agronomist, and the farm extension workers. Planning for the utilization of water must commence at the time an irrigation project is conceived. It cannot be left to be taken up when construction is advanced or after storage has been completed. I have been heartened to hear of the good work which has been done in the Kosi area. This might well be a model along with some others to be studied with advantage. India already has what is said to be the largest irrigation system in the world, but I am told that our water management system could be greatly improved. Irrigation can be wasteful, and irrigation without drainage can cause damage. Water management and soil conservation constitutes science in themselves, and I am happy that you are holding a symposium on the problem of water management. Our rivers and our groundwater are national assets which we must use to the best overall advantage. I am deeply concerned that there has sometimes been a controversy over what are termed interstate river waters. I am sure that technical solutions can be found to safeguard the legitimate interest of every region or state, and that these matters are best considered in a rational and scientific manner rather than on the basis of emotion. There is one other aspect, perhaps not directly related to your conference, on which I should like to touch: the development of irrigation especially in arid tracts, is often a starting point of an economic and social revolution. It demands more tractive power and creates new demands for roads, markets, and processing and storage facilities. The stimulus which irrigation provides to agriculture also generates new and additional incomes, much of which are invested in the facilities earlier described. A part of it also goes into village improvement schemes, the renovation and modernization of individual homes, and paving the streets, the digging of wells, and so on. I believe this kind of development offers an unrivaled opportunities to promote a new village movement. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Honorable Speaker, I present the budget for the year 2021-22. Honorable Speaker, the preparation of this budget was undertaken in circumstances like never before. We knew of calamities that have affected a country or a region within a country, but what we have endured with COVID 19 through 2020 is commendable. When I presented the budget 2020-21, we could not have imagined that the global economy, already in throes of a slowdown, would be pushed into an unprecedented contraction. We could not have also imagined that then even that our people, as those in other countries, would have to endure the loss of near and dear ones and suffer hardships brought about due to a health crisis. The risk of not having a lockdown was far too high. Within 48 hours of declaring a 3 week long complete lockdown, the Prime Minister announced the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, valued at rupees 2.76 lakh crores. This provided free food grain to 800 million people, free cooking gas for 80 million families for months, and cash directly to over 400 million farmers, women, elderly, the poor, and the needy. Even as a large section of citizens stayed home, milk, vegetable, and fruit suppliers, health and sanitary workers, truck drivers, railways and public transport workers, bank employees, electricity workers, our Anadatas, police, firemen, and the armed forces all had to go about their work as normal, but with the additional anxiety of the virus hanging over them. We recognize this, and I think I speak on behalf of everybody in this august house when I express my heartfelt gratitude to these men and women for how they were able to carry out their work and duty to provide for the nation's basics over those crucial months. Speaker Sir, for public good, honorable members of parliament and members of legislative assemblies who offered their salaries. In May 2020, the government announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat package to sustain the recovery further into the year. We also rolled out two more Atmanirbhar Bharat packages. Total financial impact of all Atmanirbhar Bharat packages, including measures taken by RBI, was estimated to about rupees 27.1 lakh crores, which amounts to more than 13% of GDP. As our government, we kept a promise to that. The Atmanirbhar Bharat packages accelerated our pace of structural reforms, redefinition of MSMEs, commercialization of mineral sector, agriculture and labor reforms, privatization of public sector undertakings, one nation, one ration card, and production linked incentive schemes are some of the notable reforms carried out during this period. Faceless income tax assessment, DBT, and financial inclusion are the others. Today, India has two vaccines available and has begun medically safeguarding not only her own citizens against COVID 19 but also those of 100 or more countries. It is added to comfort to know that two or more vaccines are also expected soon. Honorable Prime Minister launched the vaccination drive by crediting and thanking our scientists. We are ever grateful for the strength and rigor of their efforts. Having said that, we are all reminded that time and again our fight against COVID 19 continues into 2021. Now, just as it had happened after the two world wars, there are signs that the political, economic, and strategic relations in the post COVID world are changing. This moment in history is the dawn of a new era, one in which India is well poised to truly be the land of promise and hope. In this spirit, I cannot help but recall the joy that we as a cricket loving nation felt after Team India's recent spectacular success in Australia. It has reminded us of all the qualities that we as a people, particularly our youth, epitomes of having abundant promise and the unsuppressed thirst to perform and succeed. Today, data shows that India now has one of the lowest death rate of 112 per million population and one of the lowest active cases of about 130 per million. This has laid the foundation to the rival we are seeing now in the economy. This budget will be the first of this new decade. This budget will also be a digital budget, and that has happened with all your sport. So far, only three times has a budget followed a contraction in the economy. All such contractions were as a result of situation typical to India. This time, the contraction in our economy is due to a global pandemic, just like in several other countries. Having said that, I want to confidentially state that our government is fully prepared to support and facilitate the economy's reset. This budget provides every opportunity for our economy to raise and capture the pace that it needs for sustainable growth. 2021 is the year of many important milestones for our history, which we have to remember here. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. President, when I received your invitation to inaugurate the 39th annual session of the Federation of Indian chambers of commerce and industry, I was somewhat hesitant in accepting it. I was aware that since independence, each annual session of the Federation has been inaugurated by the Prime Minister. This, in fact, was the main reason for my reluctance. These annual meetings are beginning to become almost a ritual, and I am not much of a believer in rituals. I am also not happy about the tendency to turn to the Prime Minister to inaugurate every function of importance and to consider that a function which is not inaugurated by the Prime Minister is only of second rate importance. I feel strongly that other cabinet ministers, as also people in public life outside officialdom, should perform such functions far more frequently than they are at present doing. Your experience will always be useful. Within the ranks of industry, the younger group feels that it is not fully playing its part. I have often spoken of my intention to keep in touch with the younger generation. I am calling together some younger industrialists, technicians, and managers for both the private and public sectors to discuss concrete and specific problems within the broad framework of our basic objectives. It will be a sharing of thought and perhaps evolving of new ideas. Dynamic changes are needed now in attitudes and functions. In your address, Mr. President, you have pointed out that India is still a depressingly poor country and expressed concerns that we have not succeeded well enough in our effort to fight poverty and develop our economy. Poverty is indeed the central problem facing us, and it is the way in which we sat back to tackle it that we as a nation will be judged. It is a long and arduous battle that we have to wage. It calls for clarity of purpose, for determination, for unity. It demands of us all the perseverance, the discipline, the hard work of which we are capable. Slowly and steadily, we shall be building a new and progressive nation in which even the poorest in our country will be able to enjoy a minimum level of living. There will be fuller employment, more widespread facilities of education and health, greater opportunities for youth, and less inequalities of income and wealth. After you had shown so clear a recognition of the challenge of our situation, I was a little disappointed, Mr. President, to hear you suggest that we would be well advised to have a smaller fourth plan. After a detailed analysis of all the relevant considerations and a recognition of the limits of the possibilities open to us, one may come to any conclusion about the size of the plan, but to suggest and propagate that a smaller plan is desirable for its own sake and that it may even help in our fight against poverty is not convincing. There is no question in my mind that we have to mobilize our resources to the limits of our capacity and use these human and material resources in a coordinated and efficient manner. If we shirk the responsibility and seek to cover it up by phrases, we shall be merely paying lip service to the cause of the common man. It is not with caution and circumspection that we can win the war against poverty, but by our capacity to take risks and to accept burdens and responsibilities. This does not mean that we should not take the greatest possible care in the husbanding of our resources. I am anxious to seek advice on the methods by which we could achieve a higher rate of growth in our economy and ensure better performance in every sector of our activity with slower investment or input of resources in general. I do not deny that our performance in the recent past has fallen short of expectations. We could have done better in many directions. However, let us not belittle our achievements. There is much in our record of the last 3 months plan of which we can legitimately be proud. Let us not forget that the current level of industrial production is nearly twice of what it was in 1955, and we produce a large range of commodities which we did not produce before. The output of food grains increased by 70% between 1959-61 and 1964-65. Let us not ignore the great progress in education, especially primary education and technical education. New skills have been developed. Science and technology are making their presence felt in distant villages. Much of the frustration which exists in the Indian economy today and which you have voiced flow from the fact that the performance of the third plan has fallen short of our hopes. Let us, by all means, learn from our mistakes and attempt to correct them to best of our abilities and resources. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here among you for the inaugural function of the Diamond Jubilee celebrations of the India International Center. Our capital has a long standing tradition of rich cultural exchanges, which the IIC has been enriching for the past 6 decades. When the idea of the IIC was conceived in 1958 as an international platform for exchange of views, the world was coping with issues concerning a fair and stable international order and legacy burdens of 2 world wars. The process of decolonization was underway in Asia and Africa with new aspirations influencing the emerging international order. As the contemporary world is going through a phase of transition, forums like the IIC become all the more relevant. The decades immediately after the independence of our country were marked by new institutions that included the IIC. Several eminent persons such as Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and other helped actualization that vision. Crown Prince Akihito of Japan laid the cornerstone for the building in November 1960, underlining the institution's international character. It is also a happy coincidence that the center's diamond jubilee and completion of 70 years of India Japan diplomatic relations are happening this year. The IIC's international character also found a beautiful expression in the design of its building. Architect Joseph Allen Stein had designed several famous buildings in the capital, but the IIC in the vicinity of Lodi Gardens commands a unique significance. The founding of this institution was done by women and men with a vision of India's future and its role in a world of international cooperation. The IIC stands for a vision of India as a vibrant democracy where it is possible to initiate dialogue in an atmosphere of amity and understanding with national and international participation. The founders of this institution had the foresight to see what could unfold in the years to come and how the IIC could be a part of development in a new nation and also contribute to debates globally. Such debates have kept pace with time since its beginning in the early 1960s. Programs at the center have reflected global and national concerns and continue to create awareness and influence public opinion on relevant issues. But its close contacts with prominent academic and cultural institutions. The list of speakers who have addressed audience at the IIC is diverse and includes thinkers, activists, statesmen, and opinion makers. From Pearl S. Buck to Ivan Illich in earlier times, the list also has in recent times grown to include eminent personalities such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Henry Kissinger, etc. Eminent names from the world of literature like Mahasweta Devi and Amitav Ghosh also figure among many prominent speakers who addressed the audience here. Looking at these names, it is evident that the IIC has truly developed into a forum where divergent views are not only accommodated but also encouraged to enrich dialogue and discourse. I am glad to know that it was at the IIC in the little garden named Gandhi King Memorial Plaza that the late Narayan Bhai Desai narrated Gandhi Katha for a week in 2010. I have been told about numerous other memorable cultural events organized here. A Diamond Jubilee is an occasion for celebration in the life of any institution. The IIC deserves to be congratulated for having retained and sustained its original mandate. I am happy to learn that during its Diamond Jubilee year, the IIC has chosen to especially focus on programs related to women and gender. This reminds me of Kamala Devi Chattopadhyaya, the great freedom fighter and social reformer who had played a key role in the making of the IIC. She was the one who laid the first stone for this building. She is known to have influenced Mahatma Gandhi to include women participants in the Salt Satyagraha. She was the pioneer among women who contested elections right after India's independence and thereby became a symbol of the struggle for women empowerment. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of our independence with Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, let us also highlight the significant achievements of women and the several legal and social initiatives that seek to bring about change. There are several examples of Indian women who, before and after independence, have shattered many glass ceilings. Let us not forget the fearless woman scientist of the Mars orbiter mission called MOM. Women were among the leading corona warriors who demonstrated extraordinary resilience and provided healing touch to save fellow citizens, often risking their own lives. Women's participation in the unorganized sector of our economy is very high. The formal economy needs to do much more to empower women workforce. Women should be encouraged to participate more in what is known as STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and management. National and global economics should stand to benefit from their talent and their creative ways of responding to challenges. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to be here with you today. I am glad to see young scientists, especially women, among you. You have gathered here to participate in the second Indian Rice Congress, which will, over these 4 days, discuss a variety of topics related to this important grain. It is heartening to see a gathering of talented scientists who invest their time and energy for rice research and also for India's food security and livelihood. There is no need to underline the importance of rice before this audience. You know very well how rice is the cornerstone of food security in India and also a key factor for our economy. Rice also figures very prominently in our heritage and culture, right from the Vedas, our ancient literature in Sanskrit and other languages have rich references to this grain and many varieties of rice. Many rituals and ceremonies of various religious traditions are considered incomplete without akshat, the unbroken rice, which is a symbol of prosperity and even the wholeness of life. In many parts of India, the first solid food given to a child is usually something made of rice. It also features in famous legends and myths. I am sure you remember many tales, such as the one about Sudama's rice, which underlines the bonds of love between old friends. Rice is rightly called the grain of life. It arguably feeds more people than any other comparable food grain, especially in Asia. India, of course, has been the biggest exporter of the grain, helping people in other parts of the world ensure basic food security and also letting them savor different rice varieties. Ladies and gentlemen, though India is the leading consumer and exporter of rice today, the situation was different when the nation became free. The National Rice Research Institute was established in 1946, soon after the Great Bengal famine and just before we won independence. In those days, we were dependent on imports to meet our food requirements, and often the nation lived what was called a ship to mouth existence. If the nation could overcome that dependency and has become the largest exporter, a lot of credit goes to the NRRI. The institute has contributed immensely to India's food security and also to enhancing farmers' lives. For more than 75 years now, the NRRI has been working in these areas. India is proud of its rich biodiversity, and that includes varieties of rice too. Every region of this country boasts of a unique rice grain of its own with a distinct taste. In the last century, as irrigation facilities expanded, rice came to be grown in new places and found new consumers. Such a shift is not always good for the water uses in some regions. The paddy crop requires high amounts of water, but many parts of the world are facing severe water shortages due to climate change. Droughts, floods, and cyclones are now more frequent, making rice cultivation more vulnerable. Even as rice has broken new ground, there are places where traditional varieties are facing challenges. I am glad to know that traditional rice growers from the tribal communities of Odisha have helped conserve the unique genetic resources of rice for ages. I must mention here the exemplary work of Srimati Kamla Pujari from Koraput, who have been collecting and preserving hundreds of rare and endangered crop varieties, including rice. She was honored with the Padma Shri Award for her inspiring initiative. Thus, the task before us today is to find the middle path, preserving and conserving traditional varieties on one hand and maintaining ecological balance on the other. I am therefore happy to learn that NRRI scientists are actively seeking solutions by collecting, identifying, and characterizing unique rice seed that can survive these cultivation challenges. I am told that this Rice Congress has dedicated sessions to discuss those issues. Another challenge is to save the soil from excessive use of chemical fertilizers, which are considered necessary for modern rice cultivation. We need to reduce our dependence on such fertilizers in order to keep our soil health. I am confident our scientists are at work to devise eco friendly rice production systems. Ladies and gentlemen, as rice forms the bedrock of our food security, we must consider its nutritional aspects too. Large sections of low income groups depend on rice, which is often the only source of daily nutrition for them. Therefore, delivering protein, vitamins, and essential micronutrients through rice can help combat malnutrition. I am told it has developed India's first high protein rice called CR 310, which will help us in improving the country's overall nutrition profile. I am glad to learn that NRRI has also released a high zinc rice variety. The development of such bio-fortified varieties is an ideal example of science in the service of society. More and more of such efforts will be needed to support the increasing population amid a changing climate in the country. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, my first question is whether there is any particular strategy at all which our government is applying to control the price rise, because we had the 3 years of the Janta rule when there was no strategy at all. Even the plan was called the rolling plan. That is why I am asking, what is the strategy? It is not my intention to theorize here or to sound scholastic, because scholastic debates are not meant for parliament, but common sense is. I firmly believe that no theory can be viable unless it can be understood by common sense. In a nutshell, I look at the economic strategy of our government in the 1980s as radically different from the past. There was hardly any difference in the styles and approaches of the previous 2 decades. The approach then was one of the demand management without caring for the supply side. The Keynesian scholars who dominated the planning process in those days presumed that the role of the government in the economy was only confined to maintaining the suitable levels of aggregate demand, and since the government alone could print money, the chief instrument of demand, it was also presumed that fiscal measures alone could control the entire economy. Thus, demand held the key to all government policies, and slowly the supply side got a backseat. So, when there was a glut of goods in the market, it was thought that the crisis could be warded off by discouraging savings and encouraging spending, that is, through a fiscal remedy. Similarly, in a condition of scarcity, the first thing that the government would do was to tax the goods heavily, thus trying to lower consumption by artificial means. The proof of all this is there in the chain of licensing procedures, the maze of statutes and laws binding business activities, all formulated during the 1970s and the 1980s. In one sentence, the guiding principle then was demand creates supply. I am happy that our government has revised this trend. Instead of being obsessed with the demand side, for the first time, we have launched ourselves on a program to tackle the supply side. We now want to see that if the prices refuse to come down, if the inflation rate leapfrogs, the government cannot solve the problem by taxing the goods, by passing laws that will only discourage consumption. The new strategy of our government is to remove constraints on supply, on the artificial barriers between the producers and the consumer, and give the manufacturing sector a chance to function without any hindrance. The supply side economics has an emphasis on growth and not on distribution. Actually, supply side economics is in direct contrast to the demand side economics, which we have been following earlier, though I am in full agreement with this theoretical shift, which is now being totally reversed by the theory that supply creates demand. I would have been happier if all round measures were taken to improve supplies. One very important part in supply side management is the infrastructure. The turning up of the infrastructure has to be done with greater efforts and with more speed. There is no doubt that the infrastructure has improved. During this quarter, power generation increased by 17% over the corresponding period last year, coal production by about 8%, and goods movement by railways by about 16%. Down the line, there has also been a rise in the production of scalable steel by about 26%, cement by about 19%, crude petroleum by about 64%, petroleum products by 21%, and fertilizer by 65%. However, despite all these improvements, I still think that our infrastructure is very much infra. Even though our coal production has registered such a sharp increase, there has been chronic storages for superior grade coal used in industry. The movement of goods on the railways has increased, but one still has to ponder how much of it is due to higher prices for trucking and how much of it is genuine. We have also to see to what extent the increase in our power generation is because of the good monsoon, because of which the generation of hydel power has to be commensurate with the supply side management which we are attempting. In fact, our attempts have to be doubled towards infrastructure within the next couple of months. Our crucial area of concern for all of us should be the money supply situation. While I commend the efforts made by the government for decreasing the money supply situation in the country, I still feel that the recent impounding of currency in our monetary systems is not adequate enough. The cash reserve ratio and the statutory liquidity ratio have been increased. This may curtail the liquidity of the banks to the trading sector. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. It is a matter of great pleasure to me to be asked to lay the foundation stone of the Senate House of the Travancore University. When I was first asked to do so, I readily agreed because I have always felt a kind of deep interest in educational matters, and I consider it a privilege to be associated with any function connected with educational institutions, especially so in Travancore, Cochin, where education is far advanced and whereas has just been reported to us the number of students today is 29,000 out of whom nearly one third are women. It is a matter for gratification and congratulation that the university, which is not even 20 years old as yet, has, in spite of various difficulties, made steady progress, and today it has not only arts, science, and technical institutions as its constituent parts, but also a faculty for the cultivation and development of Oriental studies, including Malayalam and Sanskrit. It has been from the very beginning one of the objects of this university to promote research, and while it has on one side been helping research work in modern science, it has not neglected the humanities, which are really of such great value in forming the character of those who study them. We have at the present moment in the country a great problem. I mean, the problem of educated employment. I am not surprised that this problem is troubling you also, because even in places where education is not so widespread, the problem has made itself felt, and efforts are being made to solve it in two ways. On the one side, efforts are being made to so adjust the curricula of universities and educational institutions as to make the students better fitted for the kind of work which is just now available in the country, and which we hope will be more and more available in the future. And on the other side, attempts are being made to develop industries and other means for employment. So, this two pronged attack on the problem of unemployment is going on throughout the country. I am quite sure you are also doing the same. It is not easy for me, speaking as I do here, to make any suggestions or extend any promises. All I can say is that we admire the principal people of this part of country very much. It is therefore a matter of gratification to me that you have not confined your activities to the well known and traditional subjects. You have a variety of subjects, some of them most modern, which are needed today much more than ever before. All this is as it should be. I am only hoping that as days go by, you will be making greater and greater progress in all directions, and the problems with which you are faced today, and which have arisen to some extent on account of the peculiar conditions in this part of the country, will be solved to your entire satisfaction and the satisfaction of us all. Your Vice Chancellor said just now that our university education is changing according to changed circumstances. This is a fact. If some people are impatient today and ask for further changes, it does not mean that they do not recognize the changes that have taken place already. It only means that they want the pace to be quickened a little, and I must confess that I am myself one of those who hold this view. I assure you that I do not for a moment minimize the value of all that has been done by our older universities and even by newer universities. I am grateful for all that I have myself received from one of the oldest universities in India. I shall be the last man to say that universities have done no good at all, but I say this that according to changed circumstances, changes have to be made and changes should be made quickly. Changes are being made, but for the pace should be quickened. That is all I plead for. From what I have heard about your university, I must say that you are fully cognizant of the necessity of this change and of its pace. During the short period of about 18 or 19 years, you have already shown what tremendous progress can be made, and with the limited resources at one's disposal, you have not only increased the number of colleges and faculties in the universities and encouraged research work, you have also succeeded in attracting to it larger and even larger number of students, both men and women. Great credit is due to you also for the fact that you have co-education on such a large scale. Not that co-education is absent elsewhere, but it is not existent on the same scale as here. And I must say that if a country is to grow, both its men and women must grow. You have recognized this fact in our all walks of life. Stop.